Welcome to Unit 4 of the TESOL course at Southern Utah University. In this video, we'll focus on the suprasegmental aspect of pronunciation. In this video, we'll focus on three aspects of the suprasegmentals: syllable stress, rhythm, and intonation. In previous video, we talked about segmentals, which are the vowels and consonant sounds of the language. In this video, we'll focus on the suprasegmentals, which are sounds that go beyond individual sounds. As we mentioned, suprasegmentals can involve syllable stress, rhythm, and intonation. Let's start with syllable stress, which is sometimes called word stress. In order to create stress in English, we use the pitch of our voice should be higher. We should speak that syllable more slowly and more loudly. Let's take a look at an example word. This word is a multisyllabic word, meaning it has many syllables. How many syllables or vowel sounds are in this word? Not vowel letters, but vowel sounds. Okay. This word has three: a, ten, and shun. It's our middle syllable that receives the most stress. The other syllables are weaker, they're unstressed, so they don't get spoken as loudly or with as high a pitch, and they're spoken more quickly. So rather than get the word at, ten, shun, we say attention, attention. The unstressed syllables are spoken quickly with a lower pitch and a quieter voice. Let's take a look at another word here. How many syllables in this word? Okay, it's got four. If this word were to be said with equal stress on every syllable, we might get something more like a, ne, to, my. We don't get that. Where is the stress in this word? Anatomy. Anatomy. You can hear that the stress is on the second syllable. The other syllables are spoken more quietly, they're unstressed. Anatomy. I once had a student try to explain this word once to me through spoken English, and I couldn't recognize the word because the student was putting the stress on unfamiliar syllables for native speakers. So I heard anatomy instead of anatomy, and it took me a while to recognize that anatomy was the same as anatomy. This is why pronunciation of suprasegmentals and word stress is really important for communication. We need to make sure we're stressing the syllables so that our audience will hear the word correctly. Dictionaries can be a great way to do this. Unfortunately, English does not have a written system to represent stress, and stress can shift depending on what types of affixes are attached to a word. So often native speakers will use a dictionary to identify stress, and the pronunciation guide of most dictionaries will use symbols such as something like an apostrophe or a tick mark to show which syllable is being stressed. Now let's talk about rhythm. Rhythm is sometimes called sentence stress. So the idea here is that just as syllable stress, some syllables in a word might be stressed more than others. With a sentence, some of the words of that sentence may receive more stress than others. How do we know which words receive stress and which ones don't? Well, generally in English, the content words receive the most stress. The function words are unstressed. So content words are nouns, main verbs, adjective, adverbs. The function words tend to be more grammatical: pronouns, helper verbs, prepositions, determiners. Here is a simple sentence that only contains content words. As a result, every word in this sentence will receive stress. Students read books. Now the length of time it takes to say that sentence is equal to this next one that has a function word. Students read books. Okay. The gets squished into students because it's not a content word. As a sentence adds more function words, it still takes about the same amount of time to read. All the students are going to read books. And adding more. All the students are going to have to read books. All the students are going to have to read some books. All the students are going to have to read some of your books. So the function words get squeezed in to the content word that's near them, and so as a result those function words are harder to recognize in spoken English. They're said more quickly. Now sometimes in English we can change where we place the stress, give extra stress to certain words within a sentence in order to imply different meanings about a sentence. So if you were to take this sentence, for example, my sister Jen doesn't want to visit the art museum next Friday. We could add additional stress to particular words in this sentence in order to add extra meanings. For example, my sister Jen doesn't want to visit the art museum next Friday, which gives the implied meaning that we're talking about my sister and not someone else's sister who's also named Jen. You could pause the video for a moment and take some time to say the sentence aloud by stressing different words in the sentence and see how that changes the meaning of the sentence. Our third suprasegmental that we want to talk about is intonation. Intonation is the rising and falling pattern in English. Generally, most statements in English use a falling intonation pattern, which means that if we think of our intonation maybe having 3 levels, 3 being a high pitch, 2 being a normal pitch, and 1 being a low pitch, most of our sentence happens at 2, the normal pitch. But right before the end of the sentence, we'll do a rise and a fall for most statements. I finished reading your book this weekend. Week goes up, end drops down. We also use this across phrases. So when a sentence has multiple phrases, we might do some rising and falling with each phrase before we get to the end. My friend called me and we went out to lunch. Now we use a rising intonation pattern often in English when we want to show doubt or surprise, or in this case when it's a yes/no question. Do you have time to meet with me on Friday? And so that last part, that last syllable, we get a rising pattern. Friday. We also use rising and falling patterns in English to show different kinds of aspects of language. So here, if we want to show choice, we can use a rising and falling pattern. Do you want a hot dog or a hamburger? I can work on Monday, but not on Tuesday. And the rising and falling pattern there helps emphasize that there's a contrast and a choice. We also use rising patterns to indicate that there is a list. So for our first sentence, they packed a tent, a cooler, some food, some firewood, and a flashlight. The falling intonation pattern at the end of that sentence lets us know that the list has ended. There's no more items to be added. Some speakers of English will use this rising intonation pattern when telling a story or in conversation, as if to let the listener know, I'm not finished yet, don't interrupt me, and so they keep using the rising intonation pattern. For example, we went on a hike, and it was really long, and we were really tired, and we almost gave up. And that rising intonation pattern there lets the listener know you can't interrupt yet, the story's not finished. Sometimes we can use rising intonation pattern to convert a statement into a question by signaling doubt. It's supposed to rain all day? Your computer is broken again? Grammatically, these look like statements, but we can make them as questions by using rising intonation pattern, and then we would represent them in writing with the question mark. So in this video, we've looked at 3 suprasegmental aspects of pronunciation: syllable stress, rhythm, and intonation.